Many of us have Jewish friends, and this past week, among those friends, they observed Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is literally a day of atonement. Atonement. It's the most holy and somber day of their religious calendar, of their religious year. And it's first mentioned in the Bible in Leviticus chapter 23. On this day, Jewish people abstain from eating, drinking, wearing leather, which is a sign of luxury, even any intimate relations. The focus is not on the physical need, but on the spiritual need, the inner self, the need to be in conversation with God. The holiday begins with everybody being absolved of all the ambitious vows made in the past year, which people were unable to fulfill. That's an interesting concept. All the ambitious things that are on our lists that sometimes are rather guilt-producing. The Day of Atonement is a time of shedding guilt, laying aside the weight of all the expectations, letting go. On Yom Kippur, everyone has the opportunity for teshuvah, or returning to the divine way of living, God's way of living, God's guidelines for living. Now, Jewish people believe that we are obligated to seek forgiveness from God and from those we have hurt. Very similar to the Christian concept of needing to be forgiven and to forgive. This last thing, though, to forgive, is one of the most difficult things we humans do. Now, in Jewish thought, in their theology, God is obligated to forgive. That is God's inherent nature. Because God is God and represents all that is good, God is obligated to forgive. People, however, us, all of us, are not. God seeks that we will behave and offer forgiveness, but it's not the same definition of a human being. The very definition of God is an obligation to forgive in Jewish theology. I find that fascinating. So, we recite litanies of sins that we have committed, always saying, we have sinned. Sometimes we say, I. We remind ourselves that we are always part of the whole community, our families, our neighborhoods, our world. And one of the great problems, of course, in the world is that there are groups among us who don't feel that they are responsible for forgiving. They're only responsible for exacting, squaring the score, getting even, always doing something that equates to revenge. But in Jewish theology, in Christian theology, the deep understanding of our nature is this call to forgiveness. Well, I hope you understand a little bit more about Yom Kippur, a Day of Atonement. Today we're talking about the mountain which is the sacred mountain of God. It is for sure a physical space. And as I talk, you undoubtedly can visualize a mountain where you have been. At our 8 o'clock service this morning, one of our persons said to me, when I was in Japan, I walked up Mount Fuji, 12,000 feet. What an experience that must have been. I was in Japan once in my life, and I was riding the bullet train from Kyoto to Tokyo, and it was one of those rare moments when Mount Fuji was totally visible, because it's so high, the volcano is so massive, it goes up into the clouds, always surrounded by clouds. And it was one of those very rare days, and I was on the wrong side of the train. So I was, as you can imagine, bending down like this, trying to see. And of course, I didn't speak Japanese, and the folks across from me were Japanese. They didn't speak English, but they saw me contorting my body, trying to see Mount Fuji, and they got up out of their seats, and they motioned, over here, sit. And they moved me over into their seat so that I could see and be right at the window and see Mount Fuji. That's harmony. That is caring. That's compassion. That is people in communion with each other. Mountains represent for us physical beauty. They also, in the Bible, represent God's place of presence. Think of Mount Sinai. Moses on top of the mountain. The pillar of fire, the burning bush, the presence of God, the mighty wind. All those things which are a part of that presence. Mountains also represent for us tasks that we must do. Mountains may even be a whole season of our lives. When we know we have to climb the mountain in front of us, the challenge, the task has to be done. And sometimes those mountains are deeply hurtful and painful. They represent brokenness in our lives. But we have got to climb our way through, up and over.